All right, guys. So today's just going to be an off-the-cuff video about how to get gigs. And so, of course, this is all going to be from the lens of my own personal experience. And so I think it's important to understand that there's probably no right or wrong way to go about doing this. But I do think that there are some misconceptions about how gigs and making a career in music works. And so I thought maybe you guys could learn from some insight into my experience. I had a student from my text lesson studio ask about this recently, and I think whether you're a young musician trying to make a career in music or someone coming back to your instrument in retirement even, just trying to play some gigs around town, this is something that a lot of people are curious about. And so one thing I find a lot of people ask about is getting a gig from email or from writing an email to someone. And, I'm sure this isn't the case for everyone, but for me personally, I thought it might be useful for you guys to know. I've literally never gotten a gig through emailing someone, or I guess what you would call like a cold call. And what I found in my experience is usually when you're ready for the gig, when you're ready for a gig and you're appropriately connected, that's when the gig will just come to you. So for instance, a lot of people ask me how I got the gig with Taylor Swift. So I played a fair amount of pop gigs, pop, rock, and soul when I was younger. I played with Taylor. I played with this singer Alice Ridley. Played, a one-off with Don Henley once. Played some gigs with Philip Phillips, David Crosby, to name a few. And I think it's important to point out that none of these gigs came through an audition. With every gig, either the musical director or the contractor for the artist went off of recommendations, or they were just already familiar with me and my playing or my reputation. And so, pretty much any gig I've ever played came from a recommendation. For instance, now I play a lot. I play a lot of Chris Bode's gigs, and that just came from the pianist who was in the band at the time, Eldar, recommending me and showing Chris a video of my playing. And so that brings up the idea of the age-old saying, it's who you know. But, to meet people isn't that hard. To get to know someone, just takes going out there and meeting people. So I think it's really a lot deeper than that. It's not just who you know, it's really who you impress. And to impress someone, I think, takes a few things. To me, I think it really boils down to skills, of course, professionalism, and stage presence. So, the first thing of that is plain and simple. You've got to be good. You've got to be really freaking good. And that takes dedication. Whenever I tour with Chris, he's always practicing at the hotel room before the gig. And he's warming up in his dressing room, before sound check. And he's the highest selling instrumentalist of all time, I'm pretty sure. And he's still working on his craft. So that should be inspiring for everyone. And your abilities on your instrument will always be, I think, above all, the most important thing. And that's largely because it allows you to do something very important. That's, as cliche as it is to say, it just allows you to express yourself. When you have all the skills down, when you have a strong sound, when you have chops and technique and ears, and you can improvise in a way that's fluid, people can feel that, whether it's musicians or an audience. People can feel, your virtuosity coming through. And then when you have all those skills, it really allows you to play with a lot of emotion on top of that. And I think that's what really, connects with an audience, and also connects with the other musicians that you're playing with. And so, when I was playing pop gigs, I wasn't always soloing. But I still got those pop gigs through recommendations from like the higher level jazz gigs that I was playing on when I was younger. Like I was touring with Clarence Penn's quartet. Clarence was Michael Brecker's drummer for a long time. And I was playing with Arturo O'Farrell's bands a lot. For a while, I was a member of the Afro-Latin Jazz Orchestra. That was a big band that won a bunch of Grammys when I was playing with them. And so obviously that was a large ensemble. I made a lot of connections through that band. But the point being that these recommendations came because I was impressing people with, these three elements, my skills and professionalism and stage presence. So, professionalism is simple. That means, showing up on time, being ready to help the band do what it needs to do, being focused on a rehearsal, preparing for the rehearsal if you need to. That in itself, I think, is something that a lot of people underestimate. If you need to memorize music for a gig, that's typically a lot harder than you think. I find every young musician that comes to a gig, and is supposed to have things memorized, and it's like the first time they've really done it, they're always underprepared. It really takes, you can't just kind of have the song memorized and then, move on to the next one and, assume that you're still going to have it memorized when you get to the gig or when you get to rehearsal. It really takes, over preparing. It takes coming back to it an hour later and forgetting it and then re-memorizing it. It takes a lot of dedication. And so, those to me, are probably the most important elements of professionalism. And then, stage presence and professionalism, really, these are things that they're not necessarily teaching you in school. But stage presence means, being confident and looking sharp, or having an image or just a vibe on stage. And, just like you've got to learn music from the masters, you should learn their stage presence too. So not just the notes they're playing and how they're playing the notes, but also how they present themselves while they're playing those notes. Most of your famous musicians, most of your favorite musicians, when they play live, they're captivating the audience somehow, with how they play and how they present themselves. So you want to observe that and learn from that. And then, if you are a musician who actually wants to make a career in music, that's really important to note, especially if you want to be a solo artist. So back when I first moved to New York, it took a couple of years to get into the swing of things, but I remember I started working so much that once I played 34 gigs in 30 days. So that means I was averaging more than one gig every single day. And that was a blast. But I think it's important to note that, I get paid more from 3 gigs today than I used to get paid for 30. And that's not something that a lot of people talk about. But I think it's just important for musicians trying to make a career in music to be aware of that. Like, you should know that the ultimate goal here isn't necessarily just quantity or volume. If you can establish yourself as a solo artist, so as someone who brings a tremendous amount of value to the stage as yourself and not just as a saxophonist, then I think that's when your career can really take off. So, that might be a conversation for another day. But I hope you guys learn something from, just these off-the-cuff thoughts here. We're starting to announce fall tour dates, speaking of gigs. So if you want to check out my website, would love to see you guys in person. But otherwise, in just a couple of weeks, we've got the virtual saxophone workshop coming up. We've still got a couple more artists that I'm really excited to announce. But, for now, we already have some of my heroes, Bob Mincer, Miguel Zanon, Marcus Strickland, and a bunch of other amazing artists are going to be giving master classes there. So it's going to be an opportunity for you all to, sit down and ask any question you want, and also learn from the content that's going to be presented. I'm going to be giving a workshop on technique and application, as well as jazz language, from swing to modern, I think is what we're calling it. And we're going to go into a bunch of material there, everything from melodic chromaticism to melodic cells, and just how to learn from different eras of improvisation. So yes, it's going to be a lot of fun. Make sure to check it out. If you haven't already, make sure to join us. And otherwise, I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching, and I hope you're having a great summer.